Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Payson. Welcome back, as always, to all of you who are subscribers to the channel. If you're not already subscribers, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews of regional MMA fighters, including the next guest on the show, who is a friend of mine, a friend of the show, an up-and-coming, undefeated amateur fighter out of Indio DoJo, Evan Dreucci. Evan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be back on the show.
It's always great to have you on the show. So far, we've either been previewing a fight or post-viewing a fight. And of course, you're undefeated. So all of those post-view, after the fact fights have been wonderful. You were just on just a little bit before the new year to talk about your potential fight of the year knockout. We'll know in a little over a week because 247 Awards, second annual awards, is a little over a week away. But now you've known about this before, but it was announced today. So I appreciate you jumping on. It was announced today that you were going to be fighting Dan Waters in an advanced amateur fight, which is super exciting for Brawl in the Burgh 20 for 247 Fighting Championships at 170 pounds. You're undefeated. He's got a great record too, although he does have a loss, and it's what they're considering kind of a title eliminator. So let's talk about that. Why say yes to Dan Waters? How long ago did you know about this? How soon after your incredible knockout, 30-second some knockout, did you say yes to this fight? Because I know they've been holding some of the announcements.
Yeah, so it's funny actually, because right after my fight, I was out in the crowd talking to my fans and like the fans and my friends and family and everything, and Hunter came up to me and he said, Dan already signed, so we're waiting on you to sign the contract. So I signed it probably like 2 days after that. I went back, talked to the coaches, and then, we ended up signing that contract. But I kind of figured that's who they were going to match me with anyways. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, anybody else 170 right now that's amateur that's really putting on a show and making some noise other than Dan Walters. And I think we were on a collision course there ever since he fought Hoot Lee, and Hoot Lee dropped down to 55, because that was a heck of a fight. And I could see he has some hands, and it's going to be very exciting. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to fight him, because I really wanted to give the fans a nice show. And it's great to see that 247's matching up the best and the best, and they're not, picking smaller, easier fights for people.
Yeah, it's hats off to you guys both, willing to sign on the dotted line. Great kind of exciting sportsmanship for Dan to have already signed, and for you to make that. That's why I asked that question, because behind the scenes of the fight business is pretty exciting. We don't always get to see into that, but when fights get announced, are not always when they get made. Making fights night of a fight is kind of exciting. You mentioned that, and of course that's a fight I called when Dan Waters fought Hoot Lee. Hoot Lee won, but it was a great back and forth fight. Obviously, this is what you guys train. You train with Hoot Lee all the time. Does that kind of help you, training with a guy who's been in there for a full fight against your opponent? You think that kind of gives you sort of some tips and tricks behind the scene, or is it more just about you developing your fight game, particularly since it's advanced amateur?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it was so long ago. It was their first fight, so like that's, that he got way better since then. It's really not gonna do much looking at that and talking to Hoot about that. I mean, I watched his two most recent fights, and I see he made a good bit of progress, but I still see some things that I can capitalize on, and me and my coaches are working on some stuff for a game plan for that, and we'll see if I can execute and everything goes well. And yeah, Hunter was even talking to me back when we were doing the podcast. He brought up Dan Walters. He's like, that's who we're going to have you fight next if you win this fight. So we already had that all lined up and planned and ready to go.
Yeah, now that I'm remembering that, I watched that podcast. Great 247 combat podcast. And yeah, I think that's kind of what's exciting. I give hats off to all the fighters who have fought for 247, even if it was only one time or every time, like you and Dan, which I think is also cool, the homegrown. But that's something we're closing in. 247 is closing in on the 5th year anniversary, starting in April of 2019. Of course, COVID kind of slowed it down, but it's kind of nice to be at a point. I know this is something that Ryan Middleton, the owner of 247, has talked about to me even before the promotion actually officially started, is the idea that once you get up and running, you're a great example. Hoot Lee's a great example. Dan Waters a great example. You know, there's lots and lots of great examples now of fighters who have fought exclusively or almost entirely for 247, really been able to develop a fan base as well as kind of a record. You know, Jim Mooney does great matchmaking partly because, and he'll say it, he said it publicly on podcasts, because it's always easier for him to match people he knows. Now, sometimes he has to go out and get somebody from outside. Then he's got to watch a lot of tape and stuff like that. You mentioned, which I think is awesome, you mentioned that you've watched tape on him his last two fights. And obviously you see some things that you and your coaches, you know, are hoping to capitalize on. It's really about coming up with a game plan. I've been able to drop in last summer on a training session of you, and I got to meet and do an interview with Coach Uncle Jeff and Coach Mikey, and of course your head coach too is a longtime friend of mine and friend of the show, Danilo. What's it like trusting your coaches to not only for you to see the openings that you hope to take advantage of, but also trusting your coaches to be able to develop you to take advantage of Dan Waters', you know, openings or weaknesses?
It's just their experience, and they haven't failed me yet, you know. I mean, so why not just keep listening to them? And that's what coaches are for. I mean, they're there to coach you and guide you and teach you all the best things that they can. And that's what I'm doing. I said this the first time I was on this podcast. I said I put all my trust and everything into my coaches. I'm going to do what they tell me. I mean, they've been in the game for so long. It's kind of silly to go off on my own when I'm so young at the game. You know, why wouldn't I listen to them? I have them. I have that at my disposal. So why not use it? Um, and yeah, that not only see things, but they see things too. And it's nice because I'm starting to understand like how they're looking at things and how they're breaking things down, because a lot of the things that they saw I saw as well when I broke down the tape. So it's nice that I'm starting to develop there as well.
Yeah, that is a great skill, particularly as a fighter, but any sport. When an athlete, I mean, I hate to bring him up as a Steelers fan, you'll have to forgive me, but that's what, you know, Tom Brady was really known for. He became basically an offensive coordinator because he was able to break down defenses. He's still an athlete, you know, back when he was playing, but he was really able to get inside basically like a high level coach. And I think in any sport, being able to both be the athlete and also listen to your coaches, be humble and disciplined, which you have a lot of that humility and that willingness to focus and train hard, but then also learn the sport of the X's and O's in football is what they call it, but the sport of being able to actually know the tactics, you know, because that's a huge deal. I'm excited because you both are so for amateurs, for now advanced amateurs. You guys have a lot of experience. I know Dan likes to throw. He tends to be a striker, and you've had some great success both in striking and wrestling. For you, and we've talked about it on a couple different podcasts, people should go back and watch them. This will be your first advanced amateur fight, which is super exciting. Longer rounds, 3 3-minute rounds, ends up being an entire extra round when you do the math from a 6-minute fight to a 9-minute fight. It's a big deal, a little bit more than that. What do you think advanced amateur rule set's going to allow both for you and Dan as far as putting on a show and advancing your technique to the next level?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to be able to start as quick because it's a
Mhm.
longer fight. So those 3 2-minute rounds, those are fast paced rounds. I mean, you got to win. You got to win those rounds. Danilo always says too. He's like, you got to break down the rounds every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got to win every 30 seconds, you got to keep that like logged in the back of your head. And so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna slow down a little bit, and I'm gonna try to break things down and see things a little better, and really set them up and try to catch them on some things. And like I said, I'm really excited about the ground and pound now because I said before my first two fights, I think I could have got the finish if we could have ground and pound, but now we'll get to see. We'll get to see now if I can capitalize, if I knock him down, if I can capitalize and finish. I'm real excited about that. And then the no shin guards is nice too. I'm starting to been doing shin conditioning, which sucks, but that's part of the game, you know. And I'm excited to be able to really start throwing leg kicks, and hopefully they're more devastating too, since there's no shin pads or no shin pads yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always say visually for fans, particularly fans who have only kind of watched the UFC or One or Bellator, they look at no shin pads and think pro. And in a way, that is a pro level move, right? Having no shin pads, being able to kick and also be kicked. And for people that don't know, uh, throwing a kick can also why you got a shin condition because throwing a kick can become a disadvantage if you hit an elbow or if you clash shin to shin or sometimes even the hip bone if you kick your opponent's hip bone, which is why you're not aiming for the hip bone, hip and elbow and shin bone, the knee, you could kind of spear the knee. It's one of the defenses that Muay Thai kind of teaches, kind of pointing the knee towards the incoming leg. There's lots of cool things. You play a little bit more high level when it's bare shins. Obviously, last fight, your knockout came without the need for ground and pound, really, and the ground and pound you threw was legal below the clavicle. But when you do training, how much training do you do positionally, meaning either on a heavy bag, just on the ground, or a body bag, like a dummy bag on the ground, or even a human with mitts where you're striking in positions that relate to ground and pound positions?
Yeah, we do both. We have the 140-pound dummy that we use a lot, beat the crap out of that thing. And the last, like, ever since I got done with this fight, I started working with that more. And I could see that in my drilling and everything. Actually, today Danilo said that. He said I could see a big difference in your ground and pound just from those extra couple weeks that you were working on that dummy. And then, like I said, with drilling, a lot of our training in MMA is drilling. Like we'll do it's fight speed, but we're not connecting, and then we're playing through positions and we're flowing, and then I'm trying to control and flow to different positions and see where I can create openings to strike.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Now, when we think about this fight, it was announced today officially on 247 Fighting, and it's a big deal. And it was kind of implied that this would seem like a title eliminator because whoever wins this fight would have had a lot of fights. In your case, you'd be undefeated 4-0. He'd be 3-1 within the 247 cage. In your mindset, you know, if the fight goes the way you're planning for it to go and obviously working hard and all those things, do you think there'd be a case for you fighting for the title next? Is that something you think about as motivation now to put on a great show, or is that something you deal with once you're in the winner's circle post fight?
Yeah, that was the plan. That's been the plan. I mean, I set these short-term goals. That's when I first started. I said I was gonna get one fight in, let's see how it goes, and then after I got that first fight, I'm like, all right, let's get to advanced amateur. Now I'm an advanced amateur. My next goal is to get a title shot. So that's always was in the cards there. And I think if I put on another good performance like I have been doing my last three fights, there should be no question I should get a title shot. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. We've mentioned kind of your progress through. I still remember having you on for your pre-fight interview. This way back, people can go and see it, which is kind of cool. The bank of our conversation goes all the way back to you before your 0-0 debut, and then after your own O debut. Really seeing. And I remember calling that fight and seeing like you already looked like somebody who had been fighting, which is the plan, right? You had already looked like somebody who had been fighting for at least two or three fights. Like you look towards sort of a developed amateur fighter in your first fight, which is super great. We've mentioned sort of your trajectory, your teammate and buddy, Hoot Lee. You guys have fought sort of around the same time and you've been developing, and he's also, you're 3-0, he's 3-0. What are your thoughts on his title fight? That's a super exciting 3-0 versus 3-0. Hoot Lee versus Cowboy Eddie. It's a big fight. A lot of people are excited about it. What are your thoughts about that from a prediction side, and also just from a day and day training and sparring partner with Hoot?
Yeah, that fight's gonna be electric for sure. I mean, they both got a crazy fan base. I just can't wait to because I think I'm fighting before
Yeah.
him, I think. So that'll be fun to sit in the stands and watch that one. And Hoot's a freaking animal. Like his grappling, he's really well rounded. He picks techniques up so well. I think he's on another level than Cowboy. I really do. I mean, and that's just not me being biased or or anything like that. I train with him every day and I see what Cowboy has, and I'm not really I don't see anything real crazy that has for Hoot. So I think it's going to be a pretty one-sided fight. And I think Hoot's going to win.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate your feedback. Having trained with Hoot all the time, Hoot had a position within the first 50 seconds of his last fight against Timbo where he got in full mount, and obviously, needed to be careful of what he did on the ground, but that would have made a big difference, if it was something else. But in your situation, I think I got a little mixed up on the fight stuff. But in your situation, it's so exciting to see uh your future and what you're doing in your training. And a big part of that is people we've already mentioned: Danilo Villafort, Coach Uncle Jeff, Coach Mikey. But something we haven't talked about yet on this show, we always try to, is your sponsor or sponsors. Who's in your corner as far as financially supporting you, which goes a long way, particularly now that you're an advanced amateur and at some point, hopefully pro, things matter even more. Every fight camps. And I like this. A lot of fighters will say, the fight camp you're in is the most important because that's how the fight business is. So who do you have in your corner going into this big fight, February 24th, Brawl in the Burgh 247 Fighting Championships?
Right now, I only have Mike McCormick with GRM Contracting. He's a great guy. I mean, he's helped me out last time, and he said, I asked him again this time. I said, "Will you be willing to sponsor me again for this fight?" And he said, "Absolutely." He said he actually went on a hunting trip. He got a successful trip, and then he said he's gonna come back and he'll square me away. So I'm real grateful for that. And there's around where I live, there's a lot of small businesses, and I've been talking to some of the owners, and I think I might be able to get a couple more sponsors for this fight, which is really nice, and that'll help out a lot. And it's kind of hard too, because like I don't like really it kind of feels like a handout almost, like you're asking for handouts, but it's like I don't like doing that, but it's part of the game. It's a necessary evil. You got to do it, or I won't have the money to train or anything like that. So hopefully one day I can repay them.
Yeah, it's the business side, and it is tough, particularly when you're an amateur to kind of, and you're an advanced amateur now, undefeated. You've got a lot of reasons to kind of have people excited about you, and it's just the business side. And I think we were talking off air that sometimes not everyone's going to be able to sponsor you every fight, and it's just a business decision to just be grateful when you do get sponsors, and obviously respect for the fact that not everybody can. You're fighting a lot, which is great, right? Hopefully you keep fighting, and so, maybe some of those sponsorships that have sponsored you before can pick you back up in the summer or the next time around. And for people that are watching this that don't quite understand, what's interesting about sponsorships at your level is they just need to have a conversation with you, right? Like, sponsors are not set. This isn't controlled by anybody. So whatever they're able to do or willing to do, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's a service, depending on what somebody has service wise as a business. It could be a service, it could be really anything, it could be gear. I think it's endless what type of sponsorships are out there for people, and it can really be creative. So if somebody's out there and they think that they're from your area, or they're just a big Evan Dreucci fan or an Indio DoJo fan, you've got a great gym there. It's really, you could kind of figure out what that sponsorship looks like. And I don't want somebody to feel concerned that there's some like official level. There's no official like game plan or way it works. You'll have your own business conversation with them, case by case. And but anyhow, I definitely think it's part of the game, and I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of whoever from your area is small business sponsors you. I mean, no matter how many, if they sponsor you once or every fight, regardless, it helps you. And obviously, there's gratitude to you down the road. It's the same thing with a sparring partner. You might train with a sparring partner for a long time, like Hoot Lee or Ken Burrs, and you might train with a sparring partner one time at an open mat somewhere, and it still matters. It all builds up to your experience. Well, as always, it's great having you on the show already, and this is really very truthful. People need to check it out. There's been 4 fights announced. You're the 4th fight announced for 247 Fighting Championships Brawl in the Burgh 20. And seriously, you and Hoot Lee, of course, are big amateurs. So you're the 2 amateur fights, and then there's 2 pro fights. And that would be enough, I think, to have a lot of people there and a lot of people excited. Now, there's a whole nother, I think, 7 or 8 fights going to be announced. It's not like they're doing a 4-fight show, of course not. But I think that is super exciting to see people that have developed so much of a fan base, you and Hoot from Indio, and then obviously a stout guy. There's just so much that's going to be on the card. It's already super exciting, kind of fun that you'll be able to watch Hoot as a fan, and then the pro fights later as a fan too.
Yeah, that's if I wasn't fighting on this card, I would 100% go to this fight. I mean, this fight's gonna be crazy. And then, like I saw too that Noah Gaudiello's on this card too, and he's another up and coming amateur that you need to keep an eye on. I would like to hopefully fight him eventually before we both pop up and move to pro. That'd be
Okay.
real. But first I got to get through Dan, and then get this title shot, and then we'll see what goes from there. But yeah, I can't wait to see this card. I can't wait to rewatch it at home just as a fan, just to see everybody else fight. It's gonna be great.
That is going to be great. That's a great time to remind people to get tickets. This time, all tickets are online at 247fighting.com, but your fighter still gets credit by selecting. So you're still selling tickets, but instead of physically having them and having to meet in parking lots and wherever and all that stuff that sometimes happens to try to get tickets, people can still buy tickets from you, but through the 247fighting.com. And you mentioned being able to rewatch it later. It's such an awesome thing to have for 247 to have the 247 Live app. It's free to download. It's free to use as far as some of the things that they have on there are free, like all the podcasts are free. Right now, they have some free fights up there. So even if people don't want to pay the pay-per-view, it's still worth getting the 247 Live app downloaded on your phone to be able to use some of the free stuff. And then I think the pay-per-views are great to buy because then, like you were saying, you get to rewatch. You can buy a membership as well, and you get to rewatch each card, which keeps getting better and better. It's also cool to see the competitive mindset of you, that you're excited about Noah Gaudiello, but you're also hoping maybe at one time you guys will fight. And that's kind of what's exciting about being both a fan and a competitor, is you combine that too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure, 100%. I also I think this fight between me and Dan has the potential to be fight of the year again. So, it's the beginning of the year, fight, but I think that we're gonna put on a show and it's gonna be great. And I really do think that I'll have another nomination for next year's fight of the year, knockout of the year, all that stuff. So
Well, I think that is kind of exciting. I'm so excited for what 247 awards, annual awards, have done in just 1 year now. The second year is going to be January 24th on every platform I just mentioned, 247 Live plus Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff's going to have the award show. But it is cool to see somebody like you, some of the other fighters, to be able to have multiple years in a row of nominations. It'll be in different categories, different types. It could be newcomer of the year. It could be amateur fighter of the year, knockout of the year, all different types of things. But I think that's what's kind of exciting, that it's almost like in some ways the Pro Bowl, in the sense that when you're good year after year, you're going to be nominated and elected for things that are that are cool. Even a nomination shows that there was only 4 nominations per category. I mean, that is not much for how many fighters and how many submissions and how many knockouts and how many things happen. So I think it makes perfect sense. And yes, even though you're fighting on the first event of the year, February 24th, your fight, whether it's a knockout or a submission or a fight of the night or whatever it ends up being, could very well be nominated almost a year later. And I think that's also exciting to think about that. As always, just incredible to have you on the show. It's always an honor. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day and all those things. It's really cool. I think at this point, people don't even need me to repeat who the guest was, but my guest on MMA Fancast with Luke Payson has been Evan Dreucci. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Best skills to you and Hoot and everybody that's going to be fighting either blue or red corner. It's going to be an absolutely incredible 247 Fighting Championship Brawl in the Burgh 20, February 24th. Thanks so much.
thank you so much. Have a good night.
You got it. Take care.